Hello, my royal lovelies. Welcome back to the channel, and as always, welcome to my home, even though you can't see it. So, who has brought the most shame and the royal family into disrepute? The shameless Yorks or the sulking Sussexes? Let's take a little look at it. So sometimes you definitely must carve the mould off the cheese, remove the worm from the heart of the berry, and purge the boil, suck the poison, skim the scum. You get the drift. But what if the black pip in the rotten apples is Prince Andrew, and he refuses to be squeezed out of the barrel? It would appear that King Charles is trying everything to downgrade his disgraced younger brother and finally boot him out of his Royal Lodge Windsor residence. Yet so far the king has been unable to shuck the fraternal oyster from his luxuriously appointed shell. Basically, that's because Prince Andrew has a 75-year lease. Obviously, he's part way into that 75-year lease, but it is watertight. He signed a deal. He paid £1 million up front when he took it out, and then he stumped up his own personal money to refurb. I think it was almost 6 million at the time that he took out the lease. So he has paid a fair whack. I think he's only paying minimal kind of ground rent, if you like, on it. But he has shelled out millions on refurbishing it. So, sometimes publications put out that he's only paying what's known as a peppercorn rent. Well, he has in fact paid millions for this 75-year lease. And the lease can be inherited. So Beatrice and Eugenie could potentially take on Royal Lodge should he continue to live there up until the point of his passing. Personally, I think if it got that far, I don't think Beatrice or Eugenie would want it, to be honest. It's very difficult to split, and of course you can't sublet it. I imagine that subrenting is not part of that deal. I will say, in terms of the lease, we don't actually know exactly what the full terms are. We imagine that there might be a maintenance clause in there, but we don't actually know for sure. Those details haven't been made public. So if you are seeing people claiming that they know what's in the lease, they don't. We do know certain elements about the lease. We know how much he paid initially. We know how much the renovations were. And of course, we know the terms, the 75-year term of it. But we don't know anything more than that. So is Royal Lodge appropriate for Andrew in his standing where he is today? He's no longer a working royal. His family have grown up and left the nest. He's knocking around in that massive mansion all by himself. And of course, his ex-wife, Sarah, Duchess of York. I think it is too big. But just because we think it's too big doesn't mean to say that he should be booted out of his home. If he feels that it's appropriate and he has the money to maintain it and run it, then that is his personal choice. Personally, I think he'd be much better in a smaller property. Frogmore Cottage, I think, is a bit of a dead duck. I don't think anybody wants to live there. It's got too much bad history with its previous occupants, to be quite honest. And also, if you've had a massive downgrade from Royal Lodge to Frogmore Cottage, would you really want to stay in Windsor? I know, family are still in the area. And of course, he's lived there for such a long time. But I actually think a brand new fresh start somewhere else would be a lot better for Andrew and Sarah. Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, I think, would be quite a good option. That's where the Duke of Edinburgh chose to spend his retirement. Her late Majesty also stayed there with the Duke when she was up there. On occasion, it sort of saved opening up the big house. Or, of course, they could buy somewhere completely new, but they would have to fund, I think, the security themselves. Now, Sarah does have a townhouse in London. Well, it was actually bought for her by Beatrice and Eugenie, I think, as a bit of a nest egg. And I think they paid, about 4 million for it. But she hardly spends any time there. So people are saying, well, why can't the Yorks go into that townhouse? I think it really is an investment. It is up for rent still, I do believe. And yes, they could go and live there, but again, it's in central London. It is a quiet, tucked away area. It's a residential area. But, they would have to make sure that the security was there. Central London is a lot more risky, I suppose, than, the grounds of Windsor Castle that have the protection already there. Anyway, so I don't think Andrew and Sarah are moving anywhere without a fight. And of course, it's giving the royal family a bit of a headache. Do I think that William and Catherine want to go into Royal Lodge? I'm not so sure, my loves. They seem quite settled at Adelaide Cottage. It's not a massive mansion, but it does have another property right next door to it, like literally, meters away. That when I last checked it, that hadn't been renovated. But it could be used for extra accommodation if it was renovated. So Adelaide Cottage is still a big property. It's still very prestigious, and it's in a very, very good location. But Royal Lodge definitely would be bigger and probably more appropriate for the heir to the throne. Now, when we ask the question, who's brought the most shame on the royal family, we have to look at all the scandals. I mean, Prince Andrew with Jeffrey Epstein, Sarah with a lot of her missteps, Harry and Meghan, harpooning their family and getting tripped up and caught out in their web of lies and deceit. I think it's pretty even Stevens, to be quite honest. Let me know what you think. So the king has been mooted as trying to he doesn't have to try, he can decide himself to withdraw funding for Andrew's private security at Royal Lodge, which puts the Duke in a bit of a quandary. So the security that Andrew has is not royal. Well, it's kind of royal security, but not. Of course, remember, Harry famously tested that you cannot pay for royal security. It's not for sale. So who is protecting Andrew, I hear you scream? Ex-royal protection officers. So they have all the skills without actually being employed by the police. So they can be bought and paid for, but serving royal protection officers can not. So when the arrangement comes to an end of King Charles paying for the security, Andrew will either have to foot the estimated £3 million bill for his 10-strong protection unit himself, along with paying for property repairs and upkeep. It's looking very expensive, my loves. Or he needs to leave the 30-room mansion. Of course, it's set in 98 acres of its own parkland and face downsizing to a more humble residence, which of course would reflect his reduced status in life. So, I mean, there's been a lot of properties suggested. I think the most likely one is Wood Farm, possibly. I don't think he would go away from the security of a royal residence. So I don't think he's going to buy somewhere of his own accord. And I don't think he's going to move into London, into the townhouse either. Harry and Meghan repaid the 2.4 million of doing up Frogmore Cottage, and that was a bit of a ploy, wasn't it? Now, they did come under media pressure to repay, but I think what they were trying to do was buy less criticism. They thought that by paying it back, and this was their move, in Harry and Meghan's world of playing chess, I think they play it at a more Connect 4 level rather than chess, because they don't tend to think many spaces ahead, or rather moves ahead, do they? They thought, very mistakenly, that if they paid it back, then the press wouldn't be able to hound them about paying it back. They thought it would buy a little bit of silence. Well, it didn't really, did it, my loves? And then there's all this talk that did they actually pay for it anyway? It may have been stumped up by the king, who, I mean, I wouldn't have paid it back for them. I would have made them pay for it out of their own ill-gotten gains. That's what I'd have done. Anyway, Harry is still trying to get security. I think Harry and Andrew are in a little bit of the same boat, aren't they? They both don't sort of have automatic security anymore. So no one can say it's double standards. Andrew hasn't got his and Harry hasn't got his. And they're both now not working royals. So, you know, it's definitely not double standards. The Sussex squad always try to say that things are double standards, don't they? It's their move. It's what they always say. The only thing is, I think it's a complete load of hogwash, my loves. There's no double standards here. So I think Andrew probably should move out of Royal Lodge. His time in the royal family is completely up. There is no way back for Prince Andrew. There is no way back for Prince Harry. A royal commentator said, "Sometimes I wonder who is best at dragging the royal family into the gutter, the Yorks or the Sussexes. It's a close competition, almost impossible to say, like picking your favourite plague, or choosing between high-risk pathogens, Ebola or Zika fever. What is it to be?" Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you know, Harry and Meghan, I think, have been more hurtful, because what Harry and Meghan have done has been personal attacks on Harry's family. And I think that, for me, is what gives Harry and Meghan the edge. Prince Andrew and Sarah, Duchess of York, have made a series of bad, ill-informed, very poor, disastrous choices in life. They've chosen to mix with very questionable, abhorrent people in the past. But Harry and Meghan, but they've never personally attacked the royal family. You know, and they've never sort of, you know, given tell-all interviews, you know, against the royal family. That's not what they've been after. But Harry and Meghan, on the other hand, have actually tried purposefully to harpoon and harm the royal family. And that, to me, is what gives them the edge, I think. So let me know what you think. Who has the edge, the Yorks or the Sussexes? Right, I'm off. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big old thumbs up. Don't forget to share on social media. And of course, do hit that bell so that you know whenever I upload a new video. So, from me, mwah, to you all, and goodbye, my lovies.